I wanted to talk about why you don't need food plots, and that might come a little odd, sound a little odd coming from me, someone who owns a food plot company, a seed company anyways, but I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to offer some perspective on that. First thing though, you can see my eye, it's getting a little bit better. Many of you commented, and they hope I'm okay. I'll just talk about it on this one, but I get a shot once a month. I went for a couple of years where I wasn't managing my diabetes well, diabetes type 1, late adult onset, juvenile diabetes. A lot of people say, well, change this, do that. But you don't understand, I need to live on long-acting, short-acting insulin every day of my life. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. It just happens to a small percentage of people. And my son's type 1, Sam, since before he's been 2. So very familiar with it, but for a couple of years I didn't manage it well, so I have a little neuropathy in my feet. I've been able to stop all these bad progressions. Then I had some swelling in my eyes caused by that too, and so I have to get a shot once a month. It's been doing great. I've had 6 shots. Sometimes a doctor, I don't know if they do a bad job. This is the first time I had this particular doctor. They'll hit something that causes major bruising. The eye actually bleeds after the shot. It sounds terrible, but everything's numb other than a little pressure. And then it hurts for 2 or 3 days. You can feel it when they really hit it hard. But I'll tell you, the antiseptic they put in there, it's like soap. That's worse. So they've been rinsing me extra, and that helps. But bruise takes about a couple weeks to go away when it's really bad. So that's kind of what's happening. So just to let you know, everything's good. It's been getting a lot better. It's something they can reverse. Not the neuropathy in my feet, but and then my diabetes has been doing really well for over 2 years now. So I've been really good on that. A1C is actually, this next A1C should be almost below what the doctor wants, if that makes sense. I've been doing really well with it. So we'll get back to the video, but that's where it explains the eye. If you notice that, sometimes a lot of people do. Number 1, if you have a pass-through property, what does that mean? Well, I know people that have 10 acres, 20 acres, let's say down in Western Illinois. They're on a river somewhere, and there's big giant properties north and south of them, rivers flowing north and south, and they literally have a little bit of cover, and they're between and sandwiched between giant properties that are well managed. I know someone like that in Michigan that's done really well throughout the years doing that. He's just in between giant parcels that manage their properties well. He manages his hunt well, watch the weather, sits when he needs to, and shoot some monster bucks. But you could find properties like that in every state, many, many, many properties. Well, in that case, you're not trying to hold deer, you're not trying to draw those deer from neighboring properties, you're just watching what's passing through. So yeah, water hole might be great, that defines a spot right in front of your stand, mock scrapes, but food plots aren't really necessary in that case. Maybe you have 10 acres in the middle of giant ag land in Ohio, and so the deer aren't really focusing on your land because you don't have enough to offer them in terms of food or cover, but cover's at a premium in that area. So you can see there are these parcels around out there that you don't need food plots on, or very small. Like you use a food plot trail in a case like that on a small parcel in ag land just to direct traffic in front of a stand, something like that. But you don't need 5 acres out of 10. Now in the UP of Michigan, northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, areas of North Dakota, upstate New York, even Pennsylvania where you have big woods, Kentucky, you could have a parcel where it's 10 acres. I've seen down in Kentucky next to a giant national park where you can't hunt. You have 10 acres, you put a 5-acre food plot there, you're gonna pull deer out of that park because it's right next to the park. No one can hunt there. No one can get on your property line. You can pull them out. I've seen someone like that with a big water hole in a food plot do extremely well shooting booners like that because they're pulling them out of the park. They hunt them there, they shoot them, and you don't need much. But in that case, you put 5-6 acres of food right on the park border, you're going to do pretty darn well. And it's the same for big wilderness parcels. You turn 10 acres into 5 acres of food. You're surrounded by national forest, state land, very remote area where no one can really get in without a lot of work getting next to you. And that's where food is at a premium. Really, really critical. But there are some places where you don't need food plots. You'll see people talking about you don't need food plots. Now, I'm not going to say those people are lazy. A lot of times just don't have the time, maybe the money to plant food plots. So there are those type of people out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're consciously making a choice not to plant food plots because you think your hunt's going to get better, very, very grossly misled. And that's unfortunate. So that's why I don't like seeing some of that stuff out there where you don't need a food plot. You don't need a food plot if no one in your area is doing anything, but even then you can't direct traffic every day or count on that movement. But the minute someone down the road a mile and a half away installs a great food plot program, you probably won't see very many deer during the hunting season if they do it right. And that's what we teach our clients to do it right, so that you can be an actual herd influencer that we'll talk about. If you don't have the time, don't have the resources, then you probably won't be able to plant fruit trees, mass producing trees, maybe make some water holes. Maybe you don't have the time or money then to actually put into a good chainsaw and timber stand improvement. Maybe you don't want to work with that risk level. But bottom line is, if you don't have the time or money for food plots, you probably can't do any of these things. But TSI, what's TSI? Timber stand improvement. Just managing your timber. Unfortunately, when you're managing timber, that's often the opposite of what you need to do for wildlife. Just because you have big, beautiful trees and great boards per foot on your property, that means you probably have terrible wildlife potential on the land. And this is about a 95% rule, where if you have big, valuable timber, you probably don't have much wildlife, no matter what a forester or a logger or, quote, timber stand improvement expert tells you. Just because you manage your timber well, don't pat yourself on the back, because you need regeneration. Regeneration equals poor value timber, whether it's ash, box elder, soft maple, aspen. A lot of the trees that are poor value are the most prolific sprouters and give the most abundant cover, the fastest with the most browse, and can be managed the easiest, as opposed to hard cherry, hard maple, oak. Trees that take a long time to grow, regenerate slowly, and often take a lot of management. And foresters will look at it and say, wow, you need to manage this for timber value, quote, wildlife, and it ends up being timber value. So timber stand improvement involves clear-cut pockets, changing the diversity of your hardwoods, and a lot of effort on your part, which I'm not saying you do that as a replacement for food plots or vice versa. I think you need both. If you don't have that quality afternoon food source, deer are going to go find it somewhere else, especially mature buck. I always think that a mature buck has 5 times the home range as mature does and doe family groups. So within that home range that's 5 times larger than does, they're going to go find that quality food, and if it's low pressure, they're going to stay. That's where deer go for the season. You don't see them anymore. A lot of times they're going to find that high value food source, and they're going to stay. Timber stand improvement. How about wildlife stand improvement or timber improvement, where you're making clear-cut pockets, you're changing the diversity of the land, you're doing it where you expect to hold deer within your woods, and add mass crop trees, apple trees in clusters where you want to hunt them, acorns, chestnuts down south more. Down south means I wouldn't really look at chestnuts below or above the Michigan state line, Wisconsin line, Minnesota. You'd want to be more in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Once you get north of there, I'm not saying people don't have luck with them, but you're starting to teeter on the line where it doesn't work out. Although those chestnut companies will happily sell you those. And then you don't realize when you have a big chestnut farm like I've been to, they start dropping in September, and all the acorn or all the crop is gone before the deer season even starts. I've seen that with beautiful trees that people have meticulously managed for 20 years, and then they all drop before the season begins and they're gone. That does happen too. And so be very realistic with the timing of all these. Doesn't matter if it's chestnuts, apples, acorns, pears, whatever it might be. There's some really quote, late dropping pears that are good for Texas, for example, but not maybe good in Michigan because they get so hard they don't drop until February or March, and they do nothing for deer, and they're hard, they don't like them anyways. That might have worked down in Texas, Oklahoma, but you have to be very specific to the region you're buying these trees and have realistic expectations for timing, because apples, acorns, they're gone quickly. They can't always be depended on, and that's why you can't build a deer herd. You can't be a herd influencer with great mass crops on your property, because it's a temporary food source, not a middle of August, end of August, all the way through January, February type food source that deer can depend on. If they can't depend on it, kind of like a water hole. If water hole dries out, deer stop going to it, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get that pattern back. Well, if they dry out the end of October, you're done for the rut. The water hole's not going to do anything. It's the same with a food plot. If it runs out, they're not coming back. And the food doesn't get better 3 or 4 weeks later during the season. It's done. So very important in acorn, same thing. You get white oaks dropping. I know a great white oak spot out in Ohio, but unless you're hunting the first couple days on a southwest facing slope with a beautiful stand of white oaks on the state forest down there, then you go back in mid-October, end of October, those deer are gone because the acorns are gone. They're already gone. And then there's red oak acorns everywhere in a case like that. So when there's a good crop, acorns are everywhere. So there's nothing that stands that acorn apart from the next door neighbors or anywhere else. And I'm not saying not to plant those trees. I'm just saying be realistic with the timing of those trees. Now, water holes. Water holes can be great, but you don't attract deer to your land because of water. You define movement. Same with mock scrapes. I've seen people have 50 mock scrapes around a food plot. A friend of mine in the past, John, he had that on his property. 50 mock scrapes around his food plot, thinking he's going to attract more deer, more bucks, because he had more mock scrapes. No, they just define movement. A buck only has a certain amount of time that they used to call it time management with mock scrapes. You have 50 mock scrapes between his bedding area and where you want to shoot them. Well, you're going to keep him on your property until dark because he has so many scrapes to hit. No, he hits a couple and he moves on, whether that's in front of your stand or not. But again, timing is an issue with that. Water. Water, again, is great, but it defines movement. It doesn't attract more deer to your land. A lot of these things, apple trees. You have apple trees on your property. You're on that pass-through property. You have a little orchard right there where you can sit on a stand. Well, yeah, when deer pass, a buck passes through during the rut, he might go right to your stand location. Same with water. Because you have those areas there, it defines movement. Mock scrape defines movement. But it's not going to help you build a herd on your property. You don't have to have a food plot if you don't care to be a herd influencer. Herd influencers are the ones that actually attract deer on a daily basis to their property, even from the edge of their neighbors' properties. They can advance some bucks, not all of them, because let's face it, you can't control everything, but you advance some bucks, a percentage, 20%, 30%, not 5%. If you're a herd influencer, you're going to promote 20 or 30% more bucks to the next age class because you protect them such a long percentage of time. Some will lose, some will go to a neighbor, get shot, so that's okay. But if you're doing a good job, you're going to hold a certain percentage of bucks that you attract and move on to the next age class, and you're actually by yourself with a 40-acre property, 100-acre property in a neighborhood. You can be the herd influencer in the entire area. Now you can do it in reverse. You don't have food plots, or you have food plots. You hunt the land poorly. You spook deer off. You attract, repel, because you have a great level of attraction on your land for whatever reason. You can actually cause such an attract, repel condition that you're moving bucks over a large landscape more often. No difference than getting them to cross a road more often. They're going to get hit more. The more borders that deer cross, the more bucks die because they're exposed to an exponential amount of hunters that's ever increasing with every border that they cross. That's the idea of being a herd influencer. You're limiting the amount of borders that bucks cross. Does and fawns are easy. If you have food for them, cover, and you don't spook them out, they'll stay in the same spot just about all season long. Mature bucks, again, have a 5 times greater home range. So they're willing to go travel 2 hours or two miles away and find a better food source that they're comfortable with every single season. That's why a lot of times, again, they disappear and they come back. Herd influencer is the one that attracts as many deer to their land as possible without attracting too many does so that they can reach their optimum number of bucks. You have to have both. There's a balance there. Without attracting deer in so many places on the land that you can't actually step foot on the land to hunt it. So there's a really good balance. A well-designed property, you have that attraction. You can hold deer in certain areas. You can still access for hunting, and that's how you become a herd influencer. And when you are a herd influencer, then you get to actually have specific hunting options for time of day. You build a hunt out of it. You can't have a great hunt without a great herd. And being a herd influencer, you can't be a herd influencer without having a great hunt. The two go hand in hand. AM, PM specific deer hunting locations are critical to a well-designed property. We've seen a lot of 40-acre parcels. I can think of Michigan in particular, where they'll have 2 stand locations for different winds on a funnel they develop in the middle. What a waste of property. Just wait until the rut. Let's go hunt on November 6th. Let's not do anything the rest of the year. No, a good property should be able to hunt on opening day, the 10th day, the 20th day, the 30th day, and day 90. All the way through. That's a good hunting property. That's how you know you're a herd influencer. You're not influencing anything if you just set up a land for 1 or 2 stands and then you go in and hunt on a certain day in November. You're not protecting deer. You're just hunting moving deer coming through your property. That's not a herd influencer. So without food plots, you can't do any of this. Food plots dictate that deer are going to be over here in the evening or morning hours, and they're going to be over here during daytime hours. That's bedding and feeding areas. That develops PM stands or evening stands, afternoon stands around food sources, and then bedding area stands by morning. Morning stands by bedding areas, bedding stands by morning locations. I hope that makes sense. The more you define those areas on your land And if you have acorns, apples, random, deer can be anywhere. Those are all daytime cover locations. Now, apple trees can be used to enhance an afternoon, evening food source stand on the way to food. Water, the same thing. But without that consistent food source, and your neighbor's land can't be the land that you're putting deer on every afternoon, meaning on ag land or someone else's food plots. You need to control that. So what if they have bad food plots? What if the ag land is in a rotation where it doesn't attract deer that time of year, or doesn't only attracts deer to one side of the land or the other because of ag rotations? Then you're losing half your property at a time. You're not really able to enjoy half of your tree stands, half of the bedding areas, half the mock scrape trail cam locations. That means you can only access one side. You can only hunt one side. That's why you need to control the property with quality food source, food plots that last the entire season. And it gives you that hunting strategy where you can actually say, a lot of people we go to, they don't have morning tree stands. And it's because, kind of imagine that they have food sources, but they overhunt them. That's what happens most of the time. And that's another, knock on food plots. People say, well, with food plots, we don't see as many deer. And that's because they're overhunting the food plots. They put box blinds on their food plots. And people say, oh, we have box blinds on our food plots. Yeah, well, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, that's a different story. Southern Ohio, locations where it's more fantasy land states, where you can actually spook deer and they come back because they're not used to the hunting pressure that is applied in most of the north half of the country when it comes to whitetails. So very important to your hunting strategy options. If you don't care about being an 80%er, what does that mean? An 80%er, you should be doing well enough with your property with food plots, and you're not going to do it without food plots, that you shoot your target buck 80% of the time over a 10-year period. That means sometimes 2 a year, because you're shooting 2 out of 3 of your target bucks, or 1 or 2 out of 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 of your target bucks. The bottom line is you're being able to harvest consistently those mature bucks, and you can only do that with food, because food is what sets the daily pattern for a mature buck. And the older it becomes, the more critical that food is to his daily life, and it's unpressured food. He has to find it. And if he doesn't find it in your land, he'll go find it. Yeah, there's always that slim chance he'll come through the rut. There's a slim chance you're going to hunt that buck and kill him. But I want to see you be an 80%er. I want to see you be a herd influencer. I want to see you be in the 5% club, meaning less than 5% of all whitetail properties actually attract and hold and give the option for hunting mature bucks almost every day of the season because they're around so often. That's less than 5% of all properties. It's not just a fluke. You can build it. And it doesn't matter. It's all relative. It could be that a 2.5-year-old buck in your area is the mature buck in the area. Someone can always be that best property. Very few properties actually hold mature bucks, the oldest in the area, whether they're an average of 2 years old or an average of 6 years old. Very, very few properties. Doesn't matter what the percentage is in a given area. That's why Iowa. We'll go to clients that are sick of shooting 150 and 160-inch bucks because they're trying to get the 180s and 200s now that are in the area. Same with Southeast Ohio, some of these great areas. Cool thing about Southeast Ohio, there's a lot of competition over there. A lot of smaller parcels, but man, there's some big bucks. It's a really cool, one of my favorite places to go to. I'll actually be there next month for 9 clients in 10 days. So I enjoy going over there and seeing those properties. But bottom line is, without food plots, AM/PM stands, being a herd influencer, being in the 80% club, being in that 5% club, or even a smaller percentage that actually attract mature bucks on a daily basis. Unless you have a pass-through parcel or something, you really need to have food plots on your private land. Don't let anyone tell you, well, you can do it all without food plots. Sounds good. If I could do it out here without food plots, that'd be awesome. I probably wouldn't even have a seed company if that was the case. Because I'd rather just go work on the timber, plant some trees here and there, and not have to worry about planting, throwing lime on the soil, herbicide, controlling weeds, doing it right, spending the time to do it all and the money to do it all. I'd rather just work on the habitat and go hunt. If I was going to do that, I might as well just go find public land, because that's how much influence I'm going to have in the area. Not much different than going out and finding a great chunk of public land to hunt on. I want to be able to actually be a herd influencer in the area, and it takes food plots to do that. Be very wary of, quote, TSI, because a lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with whitetail improvement. I've seen TSI where they're taking aspen, the best regenerative wood and timber on the property, for grouse habitat, whitetail habitat, deer habitat, bucks, rabbits, turkey nesting, and they get rid of it. Hack and squirt, take a dozer, scarify all the root systems in there so that lateral root system is destroyed and doesn't grow back. So all these cases with that, and the landowners thought it was what was good for wildlife. They were talked into it under the guise of, quote, quote TSI. Be very wary of a lot of recommendations for your timber. Make sure you have clear cut, diversity, you're changing the landscape. Not to say you don't manage timber, but you do it more slant towards whitetail and do the things that we talk about on this channel, especially when it comes to food plots. Understand that you have to have food plots. And this isn't like, well, your property can be a 6 out of 10 without food plots and a 9 or 10 out of 10 with food plots. It's more like a 9 or 10 with food plots and a 1 or 2 without, no matter what you do to the timber, as far as your herd building potential and your hunting potential. It's that drastic. We see it all the time. And so I think you've come to the right place, you know, to try to get good information on food plot strategy, because food plot strategy, good food plot strategy isn't about how pretty your green food plot is. We talk about that, how to maintain great food plots. It's more about how does that food plot fit within the overall strategy of your property to ultimately become a herd influencer and actually be in the 80% club, where you can say, you know what, I have target bucks that I want to go after over a 10-year period. I want to make sure I'm about in that 80% mark for achieving that success rate on harvesting target bucks on your own land. And it's amazing how small the property can be and still get that job done. So do you need food plots? Heck yes. Some limited cases, you don't, but I'd call those the 5% club, maybe even 3% club, where you really don't need them unless some really great stars align on your property of luck. And maybe you have that property out there, and that's a good thing. But make sure you're focusing on those food plots if you actually want to achieve success with your hunting land this summer, this fall, and beyond. Now, I don't know if you've checked out our main website lately, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, but we've really had a lot going on, including hats, books, our web class, and certainly our new seed company, WHS Wildlife Blends. When you click on seed on our site, it'll take you right to our brand new site for the seed company. We have all 12 blends available. So check it all out, though. I encourage you, I appreciate you checking it out. Whether you buy anything or not, really appreciate you visiting the site and seeing what's going on, and continue to watch, because we have big things coming later this year.